We'll make a start. Hello everyone and welcome to this NELI Programme Webinar. My name is Sarah Hearn and I'm part of the NELI team at Oxford. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about the power of language assessment in general, but with a particular focus, of course, on LanguageScreen. So here's what you can expect from our session today. We'll be here for about 30 to 40 minutes. And I'm actually going to start today with some kind of interactive questions to get us thinking about why language is so important for development, and how language assessments can support your work as educators and as school leaders. Then I will give a sort of step-by-step demo of how you can get started with LanguageScreen, including uploading pupil data, launching an assessment, and generating reports. We have Kevin from our support team online to support you in the Q&A as always, so please use the webinar Q&A to ask any questions of Kevin. And as usual, the webinar is being recorded so we can share it with anyone who wasn't able to attend, and you will also get a recording afterwards as well. Okay, so let's start off with one that I quite often start my webinars off with. So if you've been to a few of these sessions, then you, I'm sure, will have answered this question before. So I want us to think about why language skills are important for learning and development. And if you wouldn't mind popping your answer into the chat, then I will see those come through. Hopefully you can message in the chat this time. I've turned it on. So let's see if anything comes through. So what does having good language skills help a child to do? Why is it important for them? I'll give it a few seconds. See what comes in. Okay, great. Okay, so we've got to communicate their needs and their emotions. It opens them up to all other learning, improves behaviour, helps them communicate with their peers. It helps them to express their needs and wants. That's come through a couple of times. To verbalise their understanding and their ideas. Yeah, that's a really important one. To build friendships, build relationships, emotional regulation. Yeah, foundation to building life skills. Yeah, brilliant. Lots of really good ideas coming through there. Thank you. So yes, I think you've pretty much hit on all of the ones that I've got on the slide here. So there is now a huge body of evidence that shows that oral language skills form the foundation for formal education. Having good language skills will help a child to do well in their literacy development and especially their maths development as well. But really, as someone said in the chat, it supports their learning across the whole curriculum because, of course, language is the medium of instruction. So it underpins our ability to acquire knowledge, to understand concepts, and as was mentioned in the chat, to kind of communicate that understanding back to our to teachers and to peers as well. And then beyond learning, our sort of language skills also influence our ability, as was mentioned, to join in with play, to form bonds with our peers and with our teachers as well, because that's also really important for how well we engage with the kind of school experience. And as part of all of that, it sort of helps us to develop a sense of belonging at school, to be able to kind of form these strong bonds and connections. And again, as was mentioned by you guys in the chat, we also use language even internally to kind of understand our own emotions and to regulate our behaviour. So with kind of poor oral language skills, all of these things just become that little bit more tricky. And I know that literacy is such an important focus in sort of the early years and Key Stage 1 especially. So language comprehension in particular is a vital component in reading comprehension. We know that in order for a child to be able to read well, they first need to be able to decode the print on the page, but then they need to be able to understand what they've read, and that's where the kind of comprehension component comes in. But actually, research also shows that early language skills also strongly predict students' pre-reading skills. So that's things like their letter knowledge, their phoneme awareness, and their rapid naming skills. And that's when they're starting school. And obviously, those then pre-reading skills in turn predict how well they can read words at the end of their first year of school. So, kind of in other words, early language skills before a child has even started to learn how to read. In this study, it was measured at 3.5. Those skills strongly relate to how well they will learn to read words once they enter school. And those early language skills also relate to a child's understanding of what they read later on at age 8, which aligns perfectly with what we already understand from the simple view of reading model. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about the risk factors for delays in language development. So pop some ideas in the chat again. Who can experience delays in language development? I'll give it a few seconds to see your answers come in. Gives me a chance to have a sip of water. Okay, so I've seen children with EAL, children with SEND needs, with SEND, children coming from lower income homes, children with autism, dyslexia. Yeah, Ruth says anyone. Hearing issues, yeah. And a few people suggesting EAL. And those who aren't getting enough interactive time. Yeah, great. Okay, so again, I think it's fantastic having this opportunity to kind of get some input from the group. It's really lovely to see all of these ideas come in. Again, you're sort of hitting on the points that I'm sort of planning on making here. So yes, you were right. I think it was Ruth who said any child can experience delays in their language development. That's absolutely true. However, there are certain factors which will elevate a child's risk for experiencing delays, and those factors can be both genetic but also environmental. And many of those are interlinked with each other. So just as an example, if a child has a parent who has a language disorder, then that is a genetic risk that makes that child more likely to have a language disorder themselves. However, if a parent has a language disorder, that might mean that they are less likely to read to their child, for example, and then that becomes an environmental risk. So there's lots of kind of interconnected factors going on here that can increase a child's risk of having a language delay. And yes, this was mentioned, sort of socioeconomic status by a couple of people in the chat. So yes, there is research which suggests a strong relationship between language and socioeconomic status, which we also have data to support. So that's what you can see on the slide here. Along the horizontal axis here is a scale which represents socioeconomic status. As you'll know, in the UK, we measure this using percentage of children in a school who are eligible to receive free school meals. So on this graph, number 1 here represents schools who have very low numbers of children with free school meals, and 10 represents schools who have very high numbers of children eligible for free school meals. And then the vertical axis here is language standard score. So as you can see, in the schools with the very lowest numbers of poorer children, the average language screen scores are above 100. So that's actually above average for the population. But the further along this horizontal axis you go, the lower the scores become. And in fact, there's actually a 12-point change in the average language screen standard scores between schools with the lowest and the highest percentage of children who are eligible for free school meals, which is an absolutely just enormous effect. And as was mentioned again in the chat, a perhaps more obvious risk factor is being someone who is learning English as an additional language. Again, we have data to show that the relationship between EAL status and language scores, and you'll see that on this graph. It shows language screen results broken down by language status, where the red line represents children who speak English as their first language, and the blue line represents children who are EAL. And children who do not speak English as their first language do, on average, receive lower language screen scores, and that difference it gets smaller as the children get older, because, of course, they're having more time exposed to the language. Most of these children, of course, will have scored lower on the test because they are just newer to learning English, than their peers who speak English as their first language. But for some of these children, they will also have a delay, or they will have a delay in their first language. So where possible, it is always important to speak to parents, and if at all possible, to test that child's first language skills too. But regardless of the root cause of that child's sort of score, we don't want children to be at a disadvantage in school because of weaknesses in their speaking and listening skills. So it is important that EAL children can benefit from our intervention support as well. Okay, so then moving on to how language data can support your teaching and your planning. So again, please pop your answers into the chat. Why is it useful to measure language skills in school? What can data on language help you to do? I'll give you a few seconds to put some ideas into the chat. And while I wait, I'll just address Nadia's question. So if a child has a rich vocabulary in Polish, will this translate into a vast English vocabulary once they come to school and start their learning? So yes, if a child has strong language skills in their first language, this will absolutely help them to catch up, or sort of to learn a second or third language even more quickly and more easily. If they have weaknesses in their first language, then that is going to make it more difficult for them to kind of catch up in English as well. Okay, so to come to this question, why is it useful to measure language skills in school? So the answers that you guys are putting in is it makes you able to see gaps in language skills. You can organise interventions for those who require them. You can tailor your interventions, help to close the gap, supports you with planning. Yeah, indicates where intervention is needed. Helps you select the correct interventions. That's a really good point. Measure progress. Yeah. Impact. See the impact of our curriculum provision and interventions. Thank you, Caroline. That's a really good point. I'll be speaking a little bit about that. Yeah, okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for your input there. Okay, so yes, the first benefit of language assessment is really that it allows you to quantify the language skills of the children in your class or your school. And this is just essential, really, because what it basically does, it converts what a child can do into a number or a set of numbers. And that then enables you to basically do everything else on that list that you can see on the slide. It enables you to make comparisons, to prioritize the support that you're offering, to measure progress over time, and so on. And without that, you're effectively working in the dark. And using an accurate and objective assessment means that you can use that data to identify learning needs early. And that can be especially tricky with language, because so often it presents as other difficulties. And I thought I could talk through a few examples here for us to kind of look through together. So on the left, we've maybe got, again, a more sort of obvious candidate, I suppose, in Elena, who's just moved to the UK and has English as an additional language. Still really useful to assess Elena with something like LanguageScreen, because it just helps you to sort of set that baseline. Even if she doesn't have a single word in English, it can still be useful as a kind of starter for 10 that you can then compare to at the end of the year. Then we've got Ben, Stacey, and Callum, who are all kind of, I guess, prime candidates in the sense that they might have difficulties that present as something else, but actually potentially the root cause of it is language. So we've got Ben, who wants to engage in activities but tends to get frustrated. He interrupts, he shouts, and then maybe he disengages and walks away. We've got Stacey, who's a quiet child. She maybe has difficulty making friends. She can be slow to follow instructions, and she's sort of starting to disengage from school. And then we've got Callum, who made really good progress in phonics and reception, but now he's in year 1. He's sort of starting to struggle with some of the reading comprehension tasks that he's taking part in. So all of these children would benefit from having a quantifiable language score and assessment to kind of get to the root of whether language is contributing to their difficulties. And I included Aisha as well, because Aisha is someone who is sociable. She's using age-appropriate vocabulary. It's still really useful to assess Aisha, because it's helping you to build a full picture of the class that you have in front of you. It's helping you to prioritize who needs support. And it's also allowing you to kind of make that comparison between perhaps children who are receiving some intervention compared to children who aren't. And you can kind of see how much catch up is taking place in those children who are receiving additional support. So kind of once you've done your assessments and you know where the need is, and vitally, you know where the need is greatest, you can then make an informed decision on how you prioritize your teaching and your intervention resource. And vitally, as we mentioned, you can actually measure the impact of the work that you're doing. And what you're really doing there is you're measuring the impact of the time and the money that you are investing into your young learners through your interventions. And you're doing this by, as I mentioned, by tracking the progress of the children who take part, and making comparisons between those children and those who don't receive any kind of additional intervention. And then with the reports that you get from your assessments, you can share the findings with the relevant adults in your children's lives, whether that's their families or speech and language therapists, educational psychologists, and so on, to really make sure that there's kind of that holistic approach to seeing that whole child and supporting that child, and making sure that everyone's on the same page. And those sort of last few points in terms of, I guess, measuring the impact of the work that you're doing is just so important, because we know that schools are unfortunately more stretched than ever in terms of finances and in terms of staff resource. So it really is vital that the interventions that you are investing in now are effective at reducing that immediate need that you see in front of you, but also that you can evidence that that investment that you're making is actually saving you costs down the line. And really those two things are linked. It's clear that for some children, language difficulties at the start of education do persist. And unfortunately for those children, the gap tends to actually widen as they get older. So what you're seeing on the graph here shows children's LanguageScreen scores over time. So here's the time on the x-axis. You've got highest score in the group at the top, lowest score in the group at the bottom, and then you've got the median is the dot in the middle. So as the children get older, that median goes up as most children in that age group's language scores go up. But what you'll see is at the bottom, you've got this kind of persistence low score right the way up through the age groups. And actually what's happening is the gap between those children at the bottom and the median is actually just getting wider. So the problem doesn't sort of go away on its own, and actually the cost of intervening and supporting at older ages is likely to be sort of significantly higher and need significantly more time than when it's delivered earlier on. And actually that cost can saving can start right away. So by providing high quality support for language in school, through kind of targeted intervention and by significantly then boosting the language skills of those children that receive it, you will be reducing the need for referrals to, for example, SLTs, for whom we know that the waiting lists are incredibly high. And of course, that's not to say that interventions like NELI can solve the problem for all children, but there are many children for whom NELI is enough and it will enable them to catch up. And that means that the specialist support, that sort of external support, can be reserved for children who have the most severe language and communication delays. And it may also mean that some of those children are able to receive that sort of high quality language teaching in school while they wait for access to Tier 3 support. Okay, and my last question here is to do with kind of the features of an effective language assessment. So as an educator, what are the most important features of a language assessment for you? Please pop it in the chat once again. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, sort of support related questions, please do put them in the Q&A. That is where Kevin is looking to kind of answer questions. It might get missed if it's in the chat because there's lots of messages coming through. Okay, so we've got that it's accessible for most children or for the majority, covers different aspects of language, short instructions, realistic pictures, quick, easy and fun, age appropriate, assesses verbal skills and comprehension, friendly, not time consuming, and that it gives you useful data at the end. Thank you. These are all really great answers. Yeah, assesses vocabulary, listening and understanding and speaking. Great. Thank you. This is so interesting. I'm really grateful to everybody who's sort of contributed to the discussion. So yes, I think again, you've sort of hit on quite a few of the points that I had in my list after, speaking and consulting with educators. We sort of built up what we hope is a pretty clear picture of what you're looking for and what's required in a language assessment. And it's, you're very time short, as we're aware, so having something that's quick, but maintains accuracy, and reliability is incredibly important. Objectivity, age standardized results are important for really helping you understand where a child is at sort of developmentally. As was mentioned, having some clear reporting that you can then share is really important. And being able to kind of track progress and identify need is really important too. So yes, in terms of how this kind of relates to the way that in which we designed LanguageScreen, LanguageScreen is both adapted to age and abilities, which means that which essentially results in a shorter test for younger children or for children with weaker language skills, to kind of keep the pace as minimal as quick as possible. And it has been designed to be as objective as possible. Children hear the same kind of short instructions at the beginning of each subtest. There's the same scoring guidance provided, and all of the scoring is automated. The assessment has been standardised against a pretty phenomenally huge data set. I think we're now over 750,000 assessments on LanguageScreen, so that's really contributing to the accuracy of those age standardized scores. And the assessment has been validated against well-established specialist assessments known as the KELF and the RAPT, and the results have been found to correlate highly. So they are results that you can trust. And that was just a couple of kind of features, I guess, of the design of LanguageScreen, and the reporting we will go into a little bit more detail shortly. But if you are interested in this, in how kind of LanguageScreen was developed, then if you scan that QR code, it will take you to a paper that we published, which kind of goes into this in a little bit more detail. Okay, so I'm now going to do my sort of demo of how to kind of get started with LanguageScreen. So the first step is to either log into your school account or to create your school account if you don't already have one. And you do this through our website, oxedandassessment.com. I've highlighted here in the bottom right the sort of chat box that we have. I say it's a chat bot, but it's real people. They're there during office hours to support you. So if you ever have any questions at any point about either NELI delivery or about your LanguageScreen use, setup, accessing the portal, anything like that, then please use that chat area, and our support team will be on hand to help you. So once you're logged in into your kind of school account, you need to create a class and then upload the data for the cohort in that class into the Oxed system. So you log into, so you create your class and then you go to import pupils, and that will allow you to populate a template spreadsheet that we've provided, either manually or with pupil data that you can just import from your school's management information system. And then that way you can upload everybody all in one go. So sort of quickest and easiest way to do it. And to make it even easier, we've also added a kind of review page that just gives you a chance to kind of check the data before it's imported into the system. And at this point, any issues with the way that the data is formatted or any missing data or anything like that is flagged, so that you can correct it before it goes into the system. Then once you have your class of your sort of imported data, then you just need to go to the QR codes tab and open or download a PDF of your class's codes. So every code is linked to a particular child, and that code you should use every single time you assess that child, whether it's the start of the year, the end of the year, the first time you've assessed them, the fifth time you've assessed them, whether you've assessed them with LanguageScreen, ReadingScreen, that code is linked to that particular child, so it can be used again and again. Now, if you are using LanguageScreen for the first time this year, I would always recommend that you do run a practice assessment. At the top of that PDF, there is a practice QR code that you can use for that purpose. It will just allow you to kind of familiarise yourself with the test before you kind of get stuck in. And just to kind of show the two options that you have available to you here, you can either stay in that QR codes tab And from there, you can actually run your assessments if you would like to use that device that you're on. So all you would need to do is just press the Assess with LanguageScreen button, just highlight it here, underneath the QR code for that particular child that you're assessing. And that will immediately launch LanguageScreen, and you can go into your assessment then and there. If you're planning to assess on a different device, so whether that's a different laptop or iPad or tablet, then another option is that you can download and either print or email that PDF to someone else, open it on a different device, and then do it that way. If you've opened it as a digital PDF, you can actually press that button again and just open a LanguageScreen assessment that way. If you've printed it out, then you would scan the QR code using whichever device you're using to do your assessments. And that's essentially what I'm saying here. So you open up LanguageScreen to do your assessments. If you're using the QR codes to kind of scan, you'd open LanguageScreen, scan the QR code, and then go. But if you're already logged into the device that you're planning on assessing from, then you can just click that blue button and it will launch the LanguageScreen assessment for you. If you did want to have a little look now at the LanguageScreen assessment, if you just scan this code here, this will launch the assessment for you. For those of you who have been using LanguageScreen for a few years now, this is a slightly different approach than you used to be able to take, because essentially we've created a kind of web version of LanguageScreen. It always used to be done through the app, but now there's the web version available, and that's the best option to use. So that's why there's the option now to assess a child on a laptop or a computer. And even if you're on a tablet or a mobile device, you can still open sort of a web version of LanguageScreen and assess that way. So that's why there's some slight changes. If you're new to LanguageScreen, then ignore what I just said, because this is your first introduction to it. If you've been using it for a few years, this might be a slight change. So I just wanted to flag that. Okay, so then you're running the assessments. I should say that the LanguageScreen assessment should be conducted on a kind of individual basis, so one adult to one child. Takes about 5 to 10 minutes, obviously depending on the age of the child and their abilities. As I mentioned earlier, that time can sort of change. Generally, you need like quite a quiet space, and they're going to need to be able to listen to the instructions through the device. And yeah, so there's 4 subtests. It assesses expressive vocabulary, which is where they see a series of images and they have to name them. Listening comprehension, where they hear a series of stories and then answer questions. Receptive vocabulary, where they hear a word and then need to identify the correct picture. And then sentence repetition, where they hear a series of sentences and need to repeat the sentences back to the assessor or to you, who's conducting the assessment. Okay, so once you have completed your LanguageScreen assessment and clicked upload, those results are instantly available for you in the OCSED system in the form of an assessment report. So to access this, you just log in as you did before. You go to the assessment reports tab, and you just fill in this or sort of select the right information. So depending on which year group it is you're using, there would be some classes which pop up here, and you just need to make sure that these dates include the dates on which you completed the assessments. And then you click generate report. And what you'll get is some explanatory information followed by a sort of group results summary table with all of the children that kind of fell within that criteria that you put when you generated the report. And then there's an individual results page for every child that fell within that group as well. So that results summary table, the first kind of table that comes up, has all of the children in that group ranked from lowest standard score to highest standard score. And there's also corresponding traffic lights to hopefully make it even easier to spot the children that would benefit most from support. The example that you can see on the slide here is a very neat and tidy example fake class, where there are 3 reds and 3 ambers and the rest are green, but actually your class or your year group profile might look very different from that. If you are assessing in a class in which you will be delivering the NELI intervention, then we also strongly encourage you to record which children you decided to deliver to. This means that you can more easily spot them later on when you're making your kind of comparisons on how the children have improved. But also we have introduced some enhanced reporting, which I will show you a screenshot of a little bit later, which allows you to kind of make nice comparisons, graphical comparisons between children who received NELI and children who didn't receive NELI. And you'll only be able to get these reports if you've put in who received NELI. So that's why it's useful for yourselves as well to be recording who goes into your NELI group. In that results table, if a child has been assessed more than once within that time period that you specify, then you will see those assessments next to each other with the most recent assessment at the top. So again, hopefully this will just allow you to kind of quite quickly see any progress that's been made by that child. Then underneath that summary table, as I mentioned, you will find an individual results page for each child as well. And these just contain a bit of more of a detailed profile for each child. And these are also suitable for sharing if required. So as I mentioned, if you wanted to share data with families or with external specialists, then these are quite useful for that. At the top there, I've highlighted the kind of scores that are provided. These are broken down into each subtest, but there's also an overall standard score, and it provides both raw scores, but also vitally those standard scores, which is really what's most useful for understanding how that child has performed compared to a national database of other children of the same age. And this was the nice enhanced reporting that I just mentioned. So this is a new assessment dashboard. You'll see the tab for assessment dashboard, which allows you to have, hopefully sort of at a glance really, a clear picture of the progress comparison between pupils who received NELI and pupils who didn't. So it's sort of represented as box and whisker plots, where you've got your kind of top scores up here, your bottom scores down here, and then you can kind of see where the bulk of the data sits here. So just to help you understand this a little bit better, so on the left you've got your whole group of pupils, so perhaps your whole class, and you can see that as a whole, the language scores of that group did shift up. But actually, when you break it down, so here you've got your NELI intervention pupils only, and over here you've got the rest, you can actually see that the bulk of that increase was really made by the NELI intervention pupils. The other pupils kind of stayed relatively similar. So that's why it's really interesting for you to be able to kind of sort of divide up the data in this way, and you can only do that by identifying who your NELI intervention pupils were in the system. And the other thing that you'll need to do is assess at least 5 NELI pupils and at least 5 other pupils as well. So 5 pupils who didn't receive NELI. That's just like the minimum amount of data that we need to be able to create that nice graph for you. Okay, thank you very much. That was a lot of information. Hopefully you've been putting some questions in the chat in the Q&A for Kevin to be answering. But if anything else comes up based off what we've discussed today, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us on support@teachneli.org. Also, if you have any ideas for kind of future webinar sessions, again, I am always open to hearing from you guys, or any feedback as well. And oh yes, the other thing I was going to say is if you did want to book in a support call, then you can scan that QR code on the slide, and it will enable you to actually kind of set up a video call or a phone call with a member of our support team, if you're kind of stuck on any aspect of getting set up with LanguageScreen or the NELI programme, or anything else. Okay, that brings us to the end of our session. As always, thank you very much, and thank you for contributing to our chat with your ideas as well. It's greatly appreciated. I'll see you next time.